Welcome, everybody. Let's give everyone about 20, 30 seconds to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just a quick reminder that this is a recorded session, and we will share the recording at the end. Just some quick opening remarks, and then we'll get into it. First, from my perspective, I lead the technology practice at Dentons and have always been fairly tech forward, testing the boundaries of technology in my practice over the past 25 years. No exception, of course, with AI. We are heavy users of Harvey, and it's abundantly clear how it really has enhanced what we do in our client services. We know the tech will continue to advance and change how we practice. What is less clear is how quickly that's going to happen and how that's going to continue to change what we do and how we practice law. I want to start by throwing out some themes from a Financial Times article, an interview with Winston Weinberg, the founder of Harvey. Many of these themes will come out in discussions today. He talks a little bit about the context problem, sort of aggregating 50 to 100 years of client history and institutional knowledge. He talks a little bit about the 10x and 100x rule that juniors, typically need 10 to 20 reps to learn, not 1,000 anymore. Um, uh, the alleged lost apprentice model that AI may force the return of true mentorship for associates. Um, and then just some talk about codifying institutional knowledge, right? That AI makes relationships stickier, which is, of course, great to hear that, and we lean into that, of course. I think there's four main themes. Sort of the new roles and the layers that's going to come out of the use of AI in the practice of law. New economics, return on investment, pricing, realignment, trust and security, data sovereignty, and then sort of the next generation and why lawyers will still matter, which I think is important certainly to me. Um, I want to do some quick intros. I'll let you guys and the panelists introduce themselves. So why don't we start? I guess Kathy, we'll start with you, and then we'll go around quick for quick intros.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joe. It's great to be here with everybody. So I'm Kathy Zhu. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Streamline AI. And as a bit of just very quick background, because I sometimes joke that I'm an accidental founder, because I spent over a decade actually practicing law before founding Streamline. Most recently, I was AGC of commercial legal and legal operations at DoorDash. I built the function from the ground up. And every single day on the job, throughout my entire time practicing, my biggest frustration was encountering chaos, right? Requests are flying in from all these different directions, from Slack and email and Teams and, 1,000 different apps. And we were flying blind, essentially. Legal felt like a black box. We're not able to separate the urgent from what's actually truly important. So that's why my co-founder and I built Streamline AI. Streamline is an AI operating platform. We automate the legal front door. We handle matter management. We provide reporting, workflow automation. So this is basically the process of how legal requests come into the legal team, how it gets triaged, managed, reported on. We integrate with tools like Slack and email, Salesforce. We have an API so we can connect with all the tools that you're using. And the goal is to use AI so that legal teams don't have to manually handle all of the administrative busy work, right? So great to be here again. Thank you, Joe.
Great, thanks you. Farah, let's go with you next.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Farah Pepper. I'm a legal innovation partner at Harvey, but that's a new development for me. I've only been at Harvey for the last few months. And if you are not familiar with Harvey, it's a legal AI tool. And thank you, Joe. We're so happy that you are part of the Harvey family. And so before I joined Harvey, my relevant experience is I'm a lifer in legal. I started my career in big law as a litigator at Gibson Dunn, was one of the founders of the e-discovery practice group back when that was a novel thing to found. Then I went in-house and had senior leader roles both at GE and most recently at Marsh, focused on that nexus between law and innovation and technology. So I'm delighted to bring all of that collective experience to my current role, where I work with Harvey's customers and am a strategic advisor to those who are using Harvey about adoption, deployment, ROI, all the things we'll get into today. And also work with the Harvey team to make sure that voice of the in-house customer is coming through loud and clear.
Amazing. Thank you. Hendrik, over to you.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon. I'm Hendrik Bartel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PostSig. PostSig is an AI native business operations AI platform, and we come in when the contract is signed. So we can actually bring operations clarity to the business, really connecting legal, finance, procurement, and the business teams all together so they can understand what has been agreed upon, what obligations exist, what rights they have, what their commercial and compliance risks are after signature. So we found that there's a lot of action getting a contract done, negotiating a contract. There's a lot of excitement about that. But then once the contract is signed and everybody sort of like goes for the high five that we now have a signed agreement, there's a lot of questions that come out of that, and those questions sit within other teams, within other stakeholders, and across many different systems and applications that need to be pulled together. Hence the name PostSig for the post signature company. And yeah, I'm based in San Francisco.
Great. Thank you. Nick?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm Nick Adams. I'm co-founder and managing partner at Differential Ventures seed stage fund here in New York. Currently investing out of our third fund. We're one of the first, if not the first, AI native fund here in the city. I've spent my whole career in the what we used to call big data world and enterprise technology before moving over here to the dark side of venture. Our focus is really leading pre-seed and seed rounds of, say, $3 to $6-ish million, typically doing about half the round. And prior to venture to differential, I spent 15 years in the tech space, and before that, I was a wannabe lawyer in undergrad who. About 6 months into a full-time job in a law firm in Boston where I grew up, I realized it wasn't going to be for me, and mercifully got hired into the tech world, but still work with a lot of lawyers and spend a lot of time with lawyers and pay a lot of legal bills, and obviously investing in and around the legal tech space. So it's great to be here.
Awesome. Thanks all. So let's go ahead and get into it. No rules except that you're automatically disqualified if any answers are that I'm not going to have a job next year. So let's just set the baseline for that. Look, I think from my perspective, I would love to learn more about how law firms and in-house teams are actually using AI in practice, right? We know how we're using it. I'd love to hear sort of from your perspective, the panelists, sort of how you're seeing it, and then for GCs in the audience, what they should be expecting from their outside counsel when it comes to AI, right? So we're going to ask specific questions, but I think those are sort of the overarching themes that we want to get out of this. So let me start with Kathy. Winston Weinberg talks about building products where humans come in at different steps to apply judgment. You're building those systems at Streamline. So tell us, what does a human in the loop actually look like day to day today and going forward? And is it a new job, or is legal ops evolving? Tell us sort of from your perspective.
Well, the good news, Joe, you're definitely still going to have a job next
All
year.
right, well, that's
We
great.
can just
Great.
start with
Good to hear
that.
that.
So maybe it's helpful because this is a great question. I think it's maybe helpful if I zoom out a little bit and just look at like what are we asking AI to actually accomplish for us, right, in legal work? And often I think there's a bit of a misconception when people talk about AI, immediately the mind jumps to legal research, drafting, redlining, the most sophisticated aspects of legal work, right? Where you're actually, asking AI to take the first pass at legal judgment, which of course triggers the most risk. But actually, there's a very wide variety of different AI capabilities that are available in the market today. So for example, at Streamline, what we're doing is we're using AI to actually automate the manual, repetitive, and often administrative tasks, right? Which actually makes up about 30% of what a legal team does. Um, and of course, when it makes sense, we've built in features and functionality to enable the legal team to spot check the output, right? So they can build more trust and reliance over time. But clearly, when they interact with our AI outputs, for instance, we're reading and scraping email content, right? And turning that unstructured text into structured text. And when there's missing information, our AI goes back to the business teams to ask for the missing context and missing information. So legal doesn't have to waste time doing that. That's a very, very different thing from asking the AI to actually pull case law for you, right? Or draft a brief from scratch. I'll give you another example. We have an in-app AI agent called Velo. It answers questions about your historical matters and that institutional knowledge that, Joe, you were talking about, right? So you can ask it questions like, hey, tell me what matters are currently, waiting on me. What am I holding up? Tell me past precedent on how this was handled. And the AI then pulls the request and the links to the request so that you can go back and you do your own audit. So again, like that is very, very different from doing novel, research. So I think to answer your question, how you build in human in the loop really it depends on what you're asking the AI to accomplish. And the more, risk that's introduced, of course, you need to introduce, that human review earlier in the process. You need to dig deeper. You need to spend longer, verifying. But I'm sure you've all heard this example before. Human in the loop is conceptually very similar to a senior associate checking the work of a junior associate, right? So this isn't new. This is something that we've been doing since the dawn of time. We're now just having the technology come in to play a part.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, from our perspective, that it's not just the human in the loop, but is how often do we need to be in the loop, right? I mean, right now it seems like we're we're getting great efficiencies and we're certainly saving time in certain respects, but we're still reviewing the work, right? We obviously still have to spend the time to, and so where's the cost savings? Where's the time savings? And sort of are there new jobs, right? Are there new roles that are going to sort of fill in some of the gaps to, help with the time savings and efficiency? And I guess, Farah, I'll turn to you. Sort of the newest roles in AI, right, are in the AI companies themselves, right? Harvey, of course, a great example. Do you see that sort of what you're doing internally foreshadowing what the roles will look like in law firms going forward?
I do think so. And maybe by way of explanation, what I find fascinating about the role that I'm in now is it didn't exist a few months ago. And this time next year, there's going to be more new roles that nobody could have predicted. But if I think about the model, it's capturing that expertise, that senior level of lived experience and turning it into roles that can help to guide those who are going on their own AI journey. If we're thinking about roles at law firms, is there an analog to what I'm doing and what law firms are building internally? Absolutely. The idea is not to have a rebranded innovation officer who lacks authority or the ability to do things. It's someone who's able to really sit down and think their way through AI and have direct conversations about what they're doing in generative AI from a place of hands-on lived experience.
Yeah.
And so I think firms need that person. What I find amazing about this time, I actually think there's never been a more exciting time to be in the legal profession because so many new roles are being created, so many new ways to add value are being created. And I love the democratizing effect of it is that regardless of where you are in your seniority, that's not really the measure. The measure is whether you have a curious mindset and are willing to get in there and get hands-on. And I love that that's opening up a lot of opportunities to folks at every stage of their career.
Great, thank you. On the topic of sort of new roles and Hendrik, I'll turn to you on obviously the access to sensitive data. Are we seeing generally new roles emerge, like an AI governance officer, or are companies and firms that are already care about data sort of relabeling existing jobs, or are lawyers taking on some of the, some of the role that an AI governance officer might take on?
think it's both, Joe. I think there's some of this really is relabeling of existing sort of responsibilities. We've got legal ops, we've got privacy, we've got security, we've got compliance, procurement, and data governance, and a lot of that is also rooted in sort of like all the regulatory work that we have to do and to produce in the background. Who has access to data? A lot of this is already governed, and to change that regulatory body on how all of this is governed, that's going to take a minute to catch up to the speed of AI that we're actually living in. Um, and, but I think you're mentioning the AI governance officer. I really think I almost see it more like an AI traffic cop, for the firm, for either the legal office or the customer. Um, Someone who routes the traffic and sort of like understands how the traffic is flowing, and how the software, the AI that you're using, helps you to surface where the traffic is flowing, helps you give you the tools to understand how the traffic is flowing, helps you to make that auditable, creates the transparency around that. So it's someone who probably creates a lot more transparency than it hasn't been there before. Um, so I guess the most efficient title is probably AI governance officer, because probably nobody wants to be called the AI traffic cop in the company.
Right, right, exactly. Thank you. Let's turn sort of on a sort of related but tangential topic on economics and return on investment and pricing and so forth. Nick, AI can do, hours and hours of junior associate work in seconds. And I'm going to ask a question that I know the answer to, but I love your perspective. From the VC seat, is it changing the billable hour model? And how is it forcing sort of the realignment between GCs and outside counsel with the use of the technology?
Yes, I mean, yes, is the billable hour model changing? But absolutely. But I think it really just exposes something that's always been at the heart of the legal industry as a whole. That's really important for your customers to understand, and I think a lot of people don't. The billable hour is leverage and arbitrage, and I think in a weird way, I think law firms are a lot like venture funds or investment firms. You are building portfolios. You guys do a lot of work, some of it for free, some of it at lower cost, to win business that you think will be higher value, longer term, repeatable customers. And you're balancing that with the cost structure of who needs to do what in the organization.
Yeah.
I think from if you look at it from purely a billable hour lens, yeah, there's a lot of pressure being applied to, your first year, second year, maybe, to some extent, third year associates. But I think what is more important to understand that people on, my side of the table and founders and all your other types of customers is that we're paying for um, judgment and risk transfer.
Yeah.
Right? When something goes wrong in our legal work, I'm never going to be able to turn to Claude or anybody else and say, it's your fault.
Yeah.
I can turn to a law firm that we work with, and being an investor who works across multiple jurisdictions and industries, and the guy who sits on a lot of boards, like I work with a lot of different lawyers. We can always turn to our lawyers and say, "You guys messed this one up." So I actually think that there will be. I think industry and law firms are an incredibly important partnership that people don't always fully appreciate or understand. And just applying more and more cost pressure to the billable hour is a mistake, because what I'm concerned about is 10, 15, 20 years from now, if we wipe out all first year, second year associates from the legal model, who am I pointing to and transferring my risk to if we're not developing a bench and portfolio of young people to come in and step into partnership roles down the road. So pressure, yes, but I think there's going to be a realignment where I don't know, I can see a world where senior partners in high quality law firms are charging $20,000 an hour. And I hate saying that as somebody who pays a lot of legal bills. But I think there's a real world where that's a scenario. So changing,
Yeah.
yes, but I think it's a bit of a misunderstanding or lack of acknowledgement of what really goes on in this industry.
Yeah, I look from our perspective, and fortunately, our clients and many of the GCs that we work with understand sort of you know, you get a work product in 40 seconds, but it has to be reviewed. And in our experience, some of the output is just it's really terrific, but it's often very wrong, right? So we're still making the judgment. We still need to spend the time to make sure that what we're getting is correct, right? And so there is definitely an understanding that yes, there's pressure on the billable hour, but the expectation is not that we're going to charge we're going to charge you for 40 seconds worth of work and not 40 hours worth of work, right? And so what we're seeing evolve is sort of where that balance ends up coming, right? And so we're able to pass on some savings, but I think there's a healthy understanding that there's still a lot to evolve, and the technology needs to evolve and mature before we actually see real transformation. And frankly, but we can trust the output as like we could from an early a junior associate, right? So
And I think, sorry to interrupt
yeah,
there,
go
but
ahead,
I think
Hendrik.
in parallel, I think we're also still trying to understand the pricing around of the technology itself, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about the billable hour and how that might be under pressure, but we're also already seeing within just the past quarter how the entire pricing economics model of the entire AI world has now come under massive pressure, right? Q1 was all about token maxing and everybody needed to like leaderboards and all of that stuff. Come Q2, that party was way over. Everybody ended up with a massive hangover. And now it's like, okay, well, that model didn't work. So now is it a flat fee model? And how much is substituted of this in the background as well? So I think understanding technology, understanding the economics behind technology, and then not running so fast to sort of like say, well, we now need to cut billable hours or make that less expensive or whatever it might be. But I think there's just, again, I talk about the compression of the cycle a lot. There's just so much that's happening in such a short amount of time that we're all trying to digest and understand. I think there's a lot of experimentation happening right now that we're all doing together.
Yeah, that's a great point, a perfect segue. Actually, I want to turn to Kathy and Farah on the question of return on investment. But Hendrik, to your point, um, there is a cost associated with that 40-second turnaround of output, right? And so I think the pricing on tokens and the pricing generally on this AI and the output is going to evolve. And so um, that's going to play into how the billable hour and generally how we charge in the future is going to be driven in large part by the costs, right, associated with that. So, Kathy, Farah, I'll let you respond to that, but it's just a specific question around sort of GCs making the business case for CEOs, to CEOs on sort of what does the ROI story actually look like, both for in-house efficiency and for rethinking outside counsel spend. Love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, I'm happy to dive in and then I'll hand it over to you, Kathy. So, I mean, yeah, this is an exciting set of questions that everyone is grappling with in real time. I'll start by acknowledging that legal's always been built on trust and relationships. And to your point, Joe, about still having a job, it's never been more important that there's rock solid relationships between law firms and in-house teams. This transparency is going to be what gets us through because the models are evolving in terms of pricing. I can share with you, it's obviously all about value, not just cost in a vacuum. And the way we've been thinking about it at Harvey is multi-tiered. The conversations that happen range in maturity. If you're thinking about that first layer where a lot of people started trying to capture value, that first layer was user adoption. which is certainly an indicator that the team is working with tools, that it's not just available to them, that they're engaging with it. And so that's where you heard about key metrics like, monthly users, daily users, multi-product usage depth, things like that. And that is something that is an indicator that there's appetite and interest and engagement with a tool, but it's really not as meaningful when you're trying to capture value and outcomes. So the second layer of that conversation would be individual user benefits, which is a signal that builds towards some of that proof. Our legal team colleagues on an in-house team going through their day differently? Are they seeing some of the key metrics that you think about when you think about an individual's productivity? Are they seeing time saved? Are they seeing additional capacity as a result of that time saved? Are they seeing better quality of outcomes? And the ability to shift from doing some of that routine work that Kathy was talking about, which takes up so much of an in-house team's day, to more high value work. So that's an important next layer. But the third one is the most important and the most mature, which would be business value. Have you invested in something that's showing up in the outcomes that the business actually cares about, not just the legal team at its level? And that's where you think about things like cost avoidance or external spend reduction or reallocation, cycle time reduction for legal, how fast things can go through and get resolved. And then, of course, stakeholder satisfaction, which I like to call joy, the joy metric. Are you making people happier with what you're doing? So what I love about all of this is a discussion that's been going on in legal for a very long time. How do you capture ROI? But this discussion about generative AI and AI in legal has turbocharged it and made it the discussion that everybody wants to have right now. And I have full confidence that that maturity of that discussion is only going to continue to get richer. The key part of it, though, is there's nowhere to hide. This conversation is here, it's happening now, and the firms that are going to thrive are the ones embracing it and being transparent and even sometimes acknowledging if they don't have all the answers, but collaboratively trying to get to new definitions of value.
Yeah, Farah, you did such a great job, laying out all the different aspects of that ROI story, right? And really discussing, the different components of value. And you and I have both been on the customer side, where we know how hard it is to actually advocate for a legal tool, especially when it's not in the budget. So, you've laid out this really beautiful kind of overarching theme, and let me just give you two different examples with our own customers and how they were able to advocate for Streamline, because I think it's really illustrative of what Farah laid out. So one of our customers is Horizon 3, which is a hypergrowth cybersecurity company, right? They brought in Streamline to handle, like I mentioned, all the requests that are coming in, and particularly with a focus on sales-related requests. The CEO, after Streamline was implemented for maybe a couple of quarters, the CEO actually reached out to me personally, which rarely happens, regarding legal tools. And he said, Kathy, we did nothing different. We changed no other processes other than bringing in Streamline. And what we saw was that new revenue accelerated, the time to close accelerated by 2x. It was so impactful that they actually downloaded the reports, the metrics from our reporting dashboard, and brought it into the boardroom. And he was so excited, he wanted to share that with me. And the GC was also able to reduce their new headcount requirements needs by a third. So that's really illustrative, right, of what Farah was talking about with that business value, business acceleration. Because at the end of the day, if you're advocating, for a tool to the CEO, to the board, which Joe, you were asking about, that's what they care about. Are you making me more money, or are you saving me more money, right? Saving me money. The other example I'll quickly share is one of our customers in the healthcare space. They freed up 20% of overall capacity for the legal team by bringing in Streamline, right? Which enabled the time that was freed up to be devoted then to recapturing overflow work that they had then, they have expertise to handle that work in-house, but because legal teams are so inundated, they're being so reactive to just what's urgent rather than what's important. that they had no bandwidth. So now they recaptured that work, brought it back in-house, resulted in almost $1 million of savings, right? That is going to also matter to the CFO. So those are two examples there.
No, that's great. Thank you both for that. Nick, I'm going to ask you to sort of verify that as a consumer of legal services. There's a sense of a gap between sort of how firms say they're using AI and what's actually happening. And so just sort of your perspective on how you're thinking about, auditing outside counsel's use of AI. And this is a bit of a hard question because, we're using AI, clients know we're using AI, and we're obviously disclosing that to them. But the savings, as I mentioned earlier, is not there yet, right? In all cases, because we still need to review the work, right? And so, yes, it's saving time in some areas, but we need to be very careful about what we're getting in terms of output. It's got to still be reviewed, and in some cases, it needs to be rewritten, right? If in the case of agreement. So, just love to hear your perspective on sort of how you're looking at it and dealing with it.
Yeah, I think there's like any agreement, I think there are things you can do upfront to try and be preventative and plan for the scenario. So I mean, um, for me, if I was a GC especially, I'd probably spend some more time in the engagement letter thinking about and trying to draw up how and where AI is being used and when it is okay and when it isn't. And then I'd probably you know, watch that data, watch those invoices and measure more closely. I mean, I think if we revert back to the previous conversation or previous question that we talked about of just, what's the value of an hour? It can be pretty easy to see how much time was spent on more commoditized roles, functions, parts of the overall legal work, and attempt to then reprice, redraft your future engagement letters, rethink how you structure your agreements with your outside counsel. So I think it's like a lot of things. You kind of put some rules in place, then you start enacting, implementing that approach, and then you measure and you adjust. So I don't think it's rocket science, but I think we have a saying at Differential. We say it's always called AI until it works, and then it's just called an algorithm.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
still in this AI age of Gen AI. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, in the legal world, generative AI is pretty good at a lot of what early stage associates, paralegals do, which is predicting next most likely words. And one of the major complaints I hear about junior lawyers is they aren't great writers. And fortunately, AI is actually a really good writer, but now you have to get to that review, make
Right.
sure it's drafted in the way that you want to be drafted, it has the right content, it's not hallucinating, etc. More that judgment part of things.
Yeah.
So I think there are sort of back to fundamentals of just how you look at and gauge these things. And I think, from a outside counsel law firm perspective, I'd probably start thinking more creatively about how to price based on deliverables and outcomes and output. Um, if you, I don't know if anybody's ever watched the BlackBerry movie on Netflix now. I love it. I've watched it twice. But as BlackBerry was falling and AT&T was locked in with the iPhone, and BlackBerry was starting to get hurt pretty badly in the 2000s. There's a scene where the SVP or whoever at AT&T says to the founder of BlackBerry, he said, the problem with minutes is that there's only 1 minute in a minute. Same is true for billable hours,
Yeah.
or tenths of a billable hour, I guess. Yeah, I think it'll be redrafted based on outputs, as just like the mobile world went to data, which you can sell a
Yeah.
lot more data in 1 minute than you can minutes in a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, we are obviously we're working with our clients on special pricing and and trying to build that into it. I think when we mentioned this earlier, sort of the time aspect to some extent will get replaced by a server capacity issue, right? So we're saving time, but there's an expense associated with processing, right? And again, whether that's tokens or the charges we're getting from the AI vendor or just our costs internally to run servers, right? And so it's interesting that time to some extent, time might be replaced by server capacity, right? So we'll have to see how that evolves. We've been focused, primarily in AI and sort of talking about the output, and we focused a lot on sort of pre-signature work, so to speak. Henrik, I'm going to turn to you. Sort of the bigger untapped return on actual post-signature work and the extracting intelligence from contracts after they've been executed, right? Tracking and doing all those important things. So love to hear your thoughts on that because that's the whole other side of the practice of law and sort of contract management that's quite important.
Yeah, no. Thus the name of the company that we founded, Post Signature Company, PostSig, because for us it was such a big gap there, and one of the issues that we saw is in in the negotiation phase, in the drafting phase, the roles are pretty clear, and you understand very quickly who's on first and how you get to that signature. But you're once you have the signature, and I said the high five moment earlier already, so once that happens, then it becomes really fuzzy. Who owns this? Who owns this long term? The guy that started this whole process, he's long lost left the firm 6 months ago, went to another firm. So who's now the stakeholder? How do we follow up? It's finance, it's procurement, it's compliance. Um, Oftentimes it's engineering as well. So we've seen some crazy stuff that we're working with, which are the realities of sort of like the post-signature world. I think one of the big ones in the world that we are in capital markets, I think, was sort of UBS getting sued by Bloomberg, I think back in 2018, because they didn't follow what they had in their service orders. So people were just using Bloomberg terminals and copying data. And in the end, Bloomberg won what, an $880 million settlement or something like that. But that happens every day because the details, the nuances that are being negotiated are oftentimes not understood or made transparent to the actual users, the stakeholders of what has been negotiated, of the product, the service, the data, etc. So making that a lot more transparent, connecting those systems where all of that data, all those data points are sitting together. That is very hidden in SharePoint drives and PDFs. Oftentimes, is also like literally a question that we are answering for our VC customers is what documents are missing. Like, okay, we've signed all of these documents. Like, can we just check for completeness? What's even missing here? Because a contract is not just a single document that you can put quickly into Harvey or into Claude or into ChatGPT to get it summarized. That's the least of the issue here. It's really understanding what's the family of documents that hangs together here to actually make this a contract family that understands all of the pieces together. And then fast forward in time, there's a fourth dimensional component in here that I've been talking about. Is like a contract changes over time because every year to get a price letter or a price increase letter or renewal letter or it's a silent renewal, an automatic renewal. People love that, right? Is like, oh,
Yep.
why are we still? How come we're now paying $1 million for the service that we started 10 years with ago? And so understanding all of the mechanics behind all of that, I think that is really where post signature happens in action. But that, in my opinion, really happens more sort of like on the business operations side, and less so on the legal side. Legal is a stakeholder in all of that, but they're not
Yeah.
the operator of the contract once it's signed.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. Well, let's stick with this sort of the data theme and actually move on to sort of trust and security. Henrik, something that's actually very important to us as a law firm, obviously, is the fear of shadow AI and data leakage. And obviously, we're very cautious about that and training our people and our associates and partners. How do law firms and GCs move from sort of prohibition on using AI to sort of more secure enablement and especially post-signature contracts, but just generally, more generally, like how should they be thinking about this? And because we don't want to stifle innovation, we want to be using this technology, but we want to be doing it in a very careful, secure way.
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst long-term answer is prohibition on this, because you don't want to have an underground movement of AI, and
Yeah.
AI is so prevalent in every single software application that we're using today. Everybody uses it, and you don't want to enable sort of like this underground or shadow usage of tools. It should just be assumed, yes, AI is being used to get my job done. That's just the status quo. It's mind-boggling how fast we got to this point. But I think that the worst part is to ban it or to prohibit it, because people will use AI anyways. So I think the GC's job is to really create a safe path around that, and not pretend that the demand does not exist. So secure enablement really starts with classifying the data, the workflows. And I think that's sort of like a big part of what we're doing here as well, is sort of like understanding, like, okay, the people who are having access to this contract or these sets of contracts or service orders do not have access to these sets of contracts or service orders. So you got to classify the data, you got to classify the use cases, I think. Then you got to apply permissions over this, and then you got to, as software providers or application providers, you got to keep the evidence, like source citations, audit logs, human approvals, human overrides, versioning history, output traceability. I think that is all that for a software, in order to work on sort of like production level. I think that's sort of like, those are the sort of like four pieces that need to be there. So it's really not shadow AI. It's not no AI. It's a governed lane, and here's how we're using it, and documenting and all of that, and adhering to that documentation, and making that documentation transparent, internally as well as externally to your clients. Because the faster you can produce a documented answer on that, I believe that also really creates trust internally and externally.
Yeah, that's great, Hendrik. Thank you. So, I guess, Kathy, Farah, from your perspective as vendors sort of react to that in terms of enablement, and Kathy, more specifically, I think you had said that the tools, and we know this, are only as good as the people that are using them, and you've seen some clients 2x revenue with Streamline. So I'd love to hear your sort of perspective on balancing, aggressive engagement of these tools to actually drive efficiencies and revenue against sort of the importance of security, right? And secure enablement overall.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think Hendrik did a great job, outlining the necessary requirements and how to go about building a system that engenders that trust. And again, as I started this conversation, I think a lot of this also depends on what are you expecting the AI to handle for you? What kinds of data are you running through the system? Does it include PII? Does it include HIPAA data? Right. And so, you know,
Mhm.
all of that, of course, factors into it. But to answer your question around, this quote actually came from one of our customers, AGC of Logitech, who's one of our earliest customers and a design partner. And he said to me, Kathy, a tool is only as good as the hand that wields it. I think people often forget that, right? They kind of expect, the tool to perform regardless of how the users are interacting with it. I think it really comes down to two things. It comes down to mindset, and as Farah mentioned already, creativity. Those are the two things, right? Can you launch something quickly, even though it's imperfect, and then iterate? And as you build more trust, as you build more comfort, start doing more and more with it. So the customers that we have that have absolutely, outperformed the rest, they double the number of matter types, so the complexity of what Streamline handles. Um, a few months after they initially launch. So maybe they launch with just the standard sales agreements, vendor agreements, general questions, but then they add more. And I'll give you some examples because this was surprising to me. I didn't even, so some of these use cases are so creative that I don't even, didn't even imagine this when I set out to build Streamline. So for healthcare customers specifically, we've seen things like research and grant applications, patient issues, consent escalations, release and
Mhm.
HIPAA data requests, right? And one customer just rolled it out to their trust and safety teams so they can handle safety escalations in Streamline. And we built in guardrails over really confidential information like trust and safety. So as those requests come in, it's cordoned off so that the rest of the legal team doesn't even see it. It's only the small number of users that have to engage with that matter, right? Or business people, as they're interacting and sending things in, legal teams can have sidebar conversations, right? And maintain that confidentiality, maintain the privilege over those conversations. Contrast that with other customers that, refuse to roll Streamline out company wide. They rely solely on, the different AI capabilities that can scrape information and pull it into the system. But that really slows down adoption, right? Because nobody knows about it. So they
Yeah.
kind of want to just cordon it off from the rest of the business. So it's really about mindset, about the ability to, you know, um, it's not change management like going from 0 to 100 in the space of 2 days, right? It's like, how do you incrementally take steps over a period of
Yep.
time? Yeah.
Kathy,
Yeah.
that was
Great.
actually interesting because we're seeing it in a very similar way over here at PostSig. I think there's sort of like once a customer comes in, their footprint grows very, very fast. And the other part, and sort of like, and I don't know why this was a surprise to me as sort of like a product guy in the background, is but once your product is out there and people are using it, they will use it, but mostly for the stuff that you didn't expect that they're using it for, right? So we
Right.
had built
Interesting.
sort of like this application for, I don't know, um, vendor agreements, service orders, and all that kind of stuff. And we tried to keep it on that level. Literally, you go live, and all of a sudden they're putting their office lease agreement in there. They put their janitorial agreements in there. They're gonna, and then it went from, okay, now, well, we're managing our coffee vendor in here. Now we're gonna manage our contractors in here. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Okay, well, that's a whole different thing. So let's slow down here. But that's, I think it's great to see that adoption. But I think again, that sort of like also shows all of us that there's a massive hunger for this kind of technology out there, and it's we're really building the factory floor whilst we're sort of like trying to figure out how to use this new technology in putting it all together.
Great. Farah, any follow-up thoughts there?
Yeah, that's all very well put. I'll just add something which I know has been a hot topic where a lot of people are asking, you know, if we start to rely more on AI, then what happens to the next generation of lawyers or that
Yeah.
steady hand that
Yeah.
Kathy was talking about? And that's something I'm particularly passionate about. And I love that leaning into AI has reopened discussions about learning and training and growth for professionals inside the legal world. And I want to throw something out that I don't think is provocative at this point, which is that the old model of learning in law, it wasn't that great anyway. And so the question is whether we're going to build a better one. And so if the premise is some people are worried that there's something we're losing if we're moving to this new world. But let's be honest about what we're actually losing. We used to say you do 200 hours of grunt work, and that somehow transforms alchemy wise into professional development. And that was a matter of luck, not skill. Sometimes you got paired with someone who taught you a lot inside of a firm, or you got lucky on the right matters, but plenty of people did not get lucky. And so the level of effort that went into doing certain tasks didn't necessarily correlate to somebody who would be an excellent orchestrator or driver in the AI car. So today we're thinking a lot at Harvey about what that next generation needs and what it looks like. Just last week, we were at Legal Tech Talk and hosted an all-day set of workshops. And one of the most popular conversations was about exactly this. How do you learn? How do you teach? And there's this huge difference between AI training, which is get the tool in the hands of people, and AI development, which is building professional knowledge and capacity to use it well. That's really at the heart of a lot of this. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about what this is doing to the profession. But I'm incredibly excited about the fact that if done well, it can actually make our learning and our development as a profession better than it's ever been before and focus truly on judgment and high level work. If they say that fortune favors the brave, I like to think that, you know, AI favors the lifelong learner. And it's forcing people, I think, to grapple with systems that we assumed were effective at teaching that really never were.
Yeah, interesting. It's a perfect segue actually to the sort of the final theme, which is the next generation of, and why lawyers will still matter, and sort of your point about training. I think the question is not so much, how the apprentice model will change and how training will change, but the question I think really is, what will we be training young lawyers on, right? If we get to the point where we trust AI so much and it becomes so advanced that drafting becomes you know, something we don't do anymore, right? It's possible. Then what do we, then maybe this comes down to, data is the real moat, and sort of context and prompt drafting is the real training, piece here, right? And so I think I'll throw this question out to the panel is, what are we training the next generation of lawyers on, right? And if these tools become so powerful on drafting, what do you see as the important roles and skills that young lawyers need? Kathy, I'll single you out, and I'll direct that question at you and let the others think about it.
Sure. Well, I think it's the enduring aspect of work in the future, which is our ability to connect, our ability to influence, our ability to negotiate, our ability to work effectively with each other. I remember being a junior associate and going through 20 boxes of stock option agreements trying to assemble a cap table. I mean, I don't know how much that actually helped me develop as a lawyer, to be honest, if at all. But because I was so fortunate, I was at Wilson Sonsini and part of their first circle practice. I also got to be on the phone with founders on a daily basis, right? And I could hear, what they were struggling with, what they were trying to do, and learned that way how to effectively counsel, albeit at a at a very, very junior nascent level. And then when I went in house, honestly, I felt like that's when I could spread my wings and fly, because now I was interacting within the business every single day and actually
Mhm.
getting to see it from the inside out. And that was a completely different experience for me. And it made a lot more sense for the way that, my brain is wired. That's what I think junior lawyers need to be doing, on a constant basis, is learning that, right? How to truly understand their clients and build trust, not just, issue legal opinions, right? Or the smartest. I'll leave you with one last thing, Joe, which is I used to tell my team on a daily basis that it's not you'll not be remembered for the smartest piece of legal advice that you gave, right? For the most like tightly drafted limitation of liability clause, but people are going to remember how you made them feel, right? How you supported them, how you enabled them to get to the outcome that they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm optimistic that the outcome here is that by taking away some of the more mundane tasks and the things that, to your point, Kathy, maybe you didn't really learn anything from, right, is there'll be more of a focus and more time to actually hone the skills like judgment and negotiating skills and people skills. Um, Obviously, our associates and our partners, are honing those skills every day. But we may have more time to do that. Young associates may have more time to do that. And those are skills that are invaluable. And I think for the future of lawyers, that the understanding of the subject matter and understanding, judgment and negotiation tactics may give them more time and training to do that and get better at it sooner than they would if they were, going through boxes and boxes of documents for, 3 years, right? Farah, I'll turn it over to you. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, plus one on the insights that Kathy is sharing. Similarly, I've done my years both at a firm, watch the sunrise from a conference room over a box of documents. It feels quaint to say it now, but that's what passed for learning when you were a junior associate. And and that continued throughout my career until suddenly one magic day, suddenly you're not junior anymore. You become the senior one teaching others. So one observation that I'll make is I hearken back to the days where I was an associate at my firm, and I care a lot about the written word. I actually don't like outsourcing my writing. I'm a little protective of it, and I will fight people to the death for the right to still use my M dash. I regret what has happened to besmirch its good name. But back in the day, I cared so passionately about writing that when summer associates came in, the new crop, folks would send them to me and be like, can you pepperize them? My last name is Pepper. Like, teach them how to write. And I did it because I cared about the writing. I cared about those basically students having a good experience at the firm. But man, was it a drain on me. Everyone else was headed to happy hour, and I had a stack of papers to grade essentially, and then meetings to have one-on-one with people to teach them something that at the end of the day, if we had the technology we had now, I could have automated a lot of my knowledge, my learnings, my training, and expedited that. And instead of sitting there talking about how you cite something, I could be sitting there talking about the issues and the reason I'm reaching certain decisions. So that's just one example from back in the day why I'm incredibly excited about what's happening, because I think if we're creative and open-minded about it, we're going to find ways to turbocharge the learning and make it more substantive than it ever was before.
Yep. Love it. Hendrik, any thoughts? Nick?
I want to be the total contrarian here on this one. And because also I'm not a lawyer. Um, but I think obviously this whole panel is about legal AI and how far we've come in such a short amount of time, and how important the work is, and how a lot of sort of like quote unquote grunt work can get automated. And I if I look at a parallel, which is not legal AI at all, it's autonomous vehicles. And I live in San Francisco, and the streets are swarming with autonomous vehicles. People like there's what 450 Waymos on the road here. And I've actually Nick and I have been in a Waymo, and my daughter likes to take Waymos, and what we're talking about here is building an optimal worded agreement that governs how we behave, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot of thought that goes into this. When you go into a robotic vehicle, you're trusting your life on something that drives with 25, 35, 65 miles down the highway. The moment you get in there, it takes you about, what, 5 seconds before you whip out your phone and start videoing where you are and what environment you are. And you completely forget that this car is hurtling down the road with 35, 45 miles an hour, equipped with sensors. But you don't think about that anymore. You're thinking about the joy, the fun, how amazing it is to move around. And that is all embedded, that's all being made possible by just having massive amounts of sensors around this car. The problem that can go wrong is that very little has to do with the robotic car. The problem that can go wrong is with the humans around this. So that's the fail mechanism in all of this. So I believe my analogy here is also sort of like to the junior associates and how the apprenticeship model will work and all that stuff. Maybe, yes, if you sensorize all of this enough, if you sensorize how your client speaks, how they think, if you get input from them more early in the process, I think you can do actually a lot more if you're living in a very AI platform world. And maybe there are workflows where that will just move to a completely AI negotiated. My agent negotiates something with your agent. My level of threshold of risk on agreement like that is X large. So because of that, I'm not going to pay a horrendous amount. But on this matter, I'm going to pay a lot extra, and the $20,000 an hour that Nick said already. And I want my best agent to negotiate with your best agent. On top of that, I want two humans in the loop to actually make this happen the way I want this to happen. But again, I think we've automated cars to a way that they can literally get you from my office to the airport without talking to any human. I believe we can see the same thing on a lot of other parts of the AI world, and we will get there. And I think to sort of like think that sure we'll save the junior professions and all that stuff. I do think this is going to be a huge problem in 5 to 10 years from now. Um, because AI workflows will creep in everywhere. And I think enabling agents early and understanding that and negotiating the pathway through those for those guys, having the AI governance cop in your firm that helps you regulate traffic early. I think that we need as well, and laying the groundwork for that early. Again, my analogy is always sort of like, look, we've actually put a car on the street that drives you, and you don't even care once you sit in it. I think that will happen throughout every AI platform. Sorry, that's
Great,
the
amazing,
contrarian view.
Hendrik. Thank you. Thank you, guys. So we are actually out of time. I wanted to ask one final question. Maybe we'll just go around quickly, 10 seconds or 15 seconds. Um, One area where you think the AI is disappointing now, and give us some promise and hope on where you think we're going in the next 2 to 5 years. That's probably like a massively loaded question we need another hour for, but if anybody has any thoughts, it'd be great. Otherwise, we'll close out.
I think there's a real lack of, well, I have a lot of feelings about this. I'll keep it very quick. I think it's just a lack of uh, dynamic capabilities in AI. And I know it probably sounds contrary, but I mean, LLMs are good at what LLMs are good at. But we have a long way to go before these are really production ready for lots of meaningful use cases. I think trying to think of Hendrik's example here of like what it would take to actually get to, automatically negotiated contracts. And there's like, sure, the LLM part of it can do some initial interpretation of the question, the problem. And then there's probably some initial drafting and, research and drafting. But then there's like an internal knowledge layer that needs to be like deeply understood. And the quick anecdote I have is like I recently negotiated a term sheet against a founder. This is the first time it's happened, who clearly used Claude or something to, refine their points to negotiate with me. And it was like straight out of, Brad
Mm.
Felt's venture deals from 2005, and used words
Yeah,
like de minimis. And I was like, this is not, let's talk through this, like why we're negotiating these specific points and why you're recommending things they are. I think that level of judgment, if we can encode that into a better type of tool than just an LLM, then we're on our path to more, defensible production ready AI. So today I think it's just like a lack of dynamic nature of AI solutions.
great.
Well,
Thanks, Nick. Any final thoughts, Farah,
final
Kathy, Hendrik?
thought is that
Yep.
I'll say when we talk about tech failures, sadly, we're usually talking about people failures. That there isn't the training, the investment, the infrastructure to make a successful program. And that's hard sometimes for the people to acknowledge. But the deep investment in people around tech is what leads to tech success.
Thank you.
For
Kathy, Hendrik?
me personally, I have this dream. I've had this dream ever since I was practicing, of never answering the same question twice or never touching the same work twice. Because if you think about it, something like I want to say 50% or maybe even higher of what legal teams do is just executing over and over again on an agreed upon, set of policies, playbooks, what have you. So I think we're still working towards this, and certainly Streamline is, and I believe other providers are as well, of building this institutional knowledge. But it has to be so complex and so contextually aware, that it can actually give you the right answer, right? Rather than something that's a near miss, which is probably more the case today. So I've hope that this bright future will come someday soon.
Great. Henrik, last thoughts? We're good?
Yeah,
Closing out?
yeah, I think it is. It's about connecting more systems together. So bringing these sensors in, and then sharing that knowledge horizontally as well as vertically throughout your organization, and making that as efficient as possible. Because I think that's what I'm seeing right now is, and what a lot of people are seeing is sort of like the hope was like, oh, because we have AI, our workday is now 3 hours or something like that. Well, that hasn't happened for me. Like my workday is longer than ever because there's just so much more you can do, and it just doesn't stop. So, but that is sort of like the lack of information processing and moving the information through in a much more efficient way. I think that's where we will see huge advances.
Great. Well, thank you all for your time. This was a great discussion, and thank you everyone else for joining. Appreciate it. And talk to you all soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.